everybody, and welcome to the Archer in Dragon's Dogma 2, a class Vocation, that I have about 40 hours in. I've not really used anything else. In this video, I'll be giving you all of the tips that I've accrued through all that time on how to use your movement options, recommended skills, and augments, as well as some cool ways to combo with your pawns, good ring options, and some armor and weapon options that you can get early and stick with for quite a long time. Now, I will not be talking about the weapons and armor until the very end of the video. It's going to be time-stamped because I don't want to spoil anything for you. If you find this video and you just want to know how to play the class, but you don't want to be told where to do stuff and what to go for, you will not have to worry about that. It will be very clearly time-stamped in the description. So let's start off with how you're going to want to play the archer, because there's two types of archers in this game, and besides obviously one of them being magic and the other not, they play pretty differently. So the magic archer is more akin to a sorcerer. You're a sorcerer but with a bow, pretty much. So you're going to want to stay back. You're going to want to have enough space between you and the enemy in order to cast your bow spells. But the archer plays much more close range. And there's actually an item, which I'll mention at the end of the video because I don't want to spoil things, that gives you a pretty good hint as to how the game is wanting you to play archer in order to get the most out of it. So let's go over those mobility options, because you actually have quite a lot available to you to be able to play close and risky, but still not take damage and be able to get out of the way of enemies. So you don't have a dedicated dodge like the thief does, but you do have this jump shoot move, which will have your character do a little roll at the end. What you're going to want to do to be able to pull this off is you're going to want to run and then jump and shoot, and you'll do a little leap, and then you'll do a roll at the end, creating a good amount of distance between you and the enemy. For another movement option, you can start running and press the loose arrow button. So it's the same as the previous one, you're just not jumping. This is X or square on controller, and this will have your character slide and then shoot, which again creates a good amount of distance. And then finally, you have leaping punt, which is where you jump in the air and press Y, and then you can follow up with an X attack. And this is a really great way where if an enemy is coming towards you, you can just leap at them, push them back, and jump away. And this thing moves you freaking far. Trust me, as someone who has leapt to my death off of cliffs because I go flying, it will put you a good ways away from the enemy. This kick also has a good amount of knockdown on it. So depending on how high your knockdown stat is, you can actually just straight up break an enemy's stance with this kick. And the follow-up attack actually does a lot of damage. So do not be afraid to kick some enemies in the face if they're running up to you. Do a little jump, do a kick. You don't need to be running, and you can create that distance. With all of these movement options, you're actually quite slippery and can play much closer to the enemy than you might expect to be able to. You're definitely going to want to get used to this. I think a lot of people find archer to be a little underwhelming because they're playing it more akin to a magic archer, sitting in the back, using your skills, which you're definitely going to want to do that sometimes, but you're wanting to play much closer and create that distance with your movement options when you need to get the distance to use some of your skills. Speaking of skills, let's talk about archer skills, which ones I tend to stick with, and some cool interactions that you can have with your pawns. So I'll always have with me one of the status effect causing arrows. This is things like a blighted arrow for poison. You can have explosion arrow to set them on fire, etc., etc. I'm actually running two of these at the moment instead of using the ultimate skill, which I'll get into later. But I definitely always have one. Now, which one I bring depends on what I'm expecting to fight. If I'm in an area where things are pretty weak to fire, then I'm going to want to bring explosion arrow for sure. But if I'm fighting a fire dragon, I probably don't want to be doing that. And I'll bring something like the arrow that inflicts the water effect on them. Now, of course, you're not always going to be able to know what the enemy is weak to unless you end up getting into combat. Your pawn is like, oh, they're weak to fire, master. And then you go, oh, well, I don't have fire right now, but I can come back later now that I know that they're weak to fire. But it's pretty hard to just completely build your arrows against an enemy's weakness. So what you also can do is choose one of the status effect causing arrows based on what your mage pawn is bringing. So currently, I am running with a pawn that has the lightning enchantment for weapons. So my weapon always has lightning on it. So I decided to bring Deluging Shot with me. What this does is it makes the enemy wet, pretty much. Not sexual, but they get wet. And if they're wet, they take a lot more damage from lightning. They can also be frozen, so you can also run this with a mage pawn that's running an ice enchantment. That's going to mean that you can make the enemy wet, and then you can spam ice attacks at them, and they get frozen really quickly. It's honestly really strong, even if they're not particularly super weak to ice, because you can freeze them so quickly, and an enemy that cannot move is a useless enemy. If you end up not having a mage pawn for some reason, or you just don't want to use one, or you realize that you're like to have your mage pawns not have enchantments for some reason, you can always just bring blighted arrows. This is going to make it to where you poison enemies, and extra damage against enemies is never a bad thing. Next skill that I always bring with me is Torrent Shot. One, because it allows me to spam attacks at a monster's weak point, which does an absolute assload of damage. But it's also a really good way of applying any of the status effects super freaking quickly, because you're just sitting there like a machine gun spamming arrows at the enemy. So what I've been doing at the moment, this is my favorite thing to do, is I use Deluging Shot, I hit the enemy, they get all wet, I've got lightning enchantment on my bow, and I just use Torrent Shot to just shoot at their head. And this does so much damage that I really don't even need to bring another damaging ability with me. I mean, I do, but you really don't need to. So yeah, make use of that. It does a ton of status effect buildup, ton of damage to weak points. I'll also always tend to always have Deadly Shot on me. The reason is because it's essentially Dragon Piercer for Monster Hunter, which does lots of cool stuff. It's a nice move to aim at weak spots for some really big damage, or you can pin enemies against the wall. But it also does a lot of knockdown damage. So you can aim at Minotaur's legs, you can aim at Cyclops' legs. This is going to make them fall over pretty quickly, or you can just aim at their head and it will concuss them super fast. Again, you're going to do more knockdown damage depending on your overall knockdown power in your actual build. So if you want to really just get in there with knocking enemies down along with a warrior, I'd get a warrior pawn, you a Deadly Shot, get a bow with tons of knockdown power, upgrade the bow to add a ton of knockdown power, and you will knock them down very, very quickly. But the other reason why I really like Deadly Shot is because there's a timing skill mechanic to this attack. If you release the ability at the perfect time, your camera will slow down and you'll do extra damage. And the extra damage is a significant boost to your damage. It can take a little bit to get this timing down because you have to release it at the perfect time. They really don't give you a lot of wiggle room, which essentially means that you're gonna have to get used to the timing of it. Unless you have the most godlike reaction speed I've seen in my life and can release the button in order to shoot the shot as soon as your character flashes, you're probably gonna just have to get a feel for the timing. That's currently where I'm at. I kind of just feel the timing out. You're definitely gonna miss some, but it's just a really rewarding feeling to consistently hit the perfect time Deadly Shots. You see the increase in damage, you see the increase in knockdown, and it's just a very rewarding skill, and it's really good. Now, the final skill, I've kind of changed around what I like to bring. So after I unlocked the Archer's ultimate ability from the Meister of Archery, I was just bringing that because when I got it, I saw that it did like 3/4 of a Chimera's health in one shot. And it does do a lot of damage, but you have to use all of your stamina to use it. And now that I've gotten significantly better at using Deadly Shot and getting that timing off and mixing the elements with my pawns and really focusing on enemies' weakness points, etc., I found that I don't think I really need it to do the big damage. I'm doing plenty of damage with Deadly Shot and spamming lightning at an enemy that I just don't think you really need that anymore. So I think it's really good if you're still getting that Deadly Shot timing down because it's basically a guaranteed massive damage ability, and it might still be worth bringing, but I've just found that I don't really need it. So I bring an extra status effect with me, so I'll normally bring at the moment Deluging Shot and the Erupting Shot. so that I can cover 2 enemy weaknesses. But what I would actually recommend that you bring along with you is something to deal with a lot of enemies in case you end up getting swarmed. So you can use something like Spiral Arrow, or you can use Cascade Shot. I would personally go with Cascade Shot because it does hit a lot of enemies and you can use it more often. But of course it's really up to you. I just definitely recommend that you bring at least one of the Erupting Shot, Incendiary Shot, Deluging Shot, Noxious Shot. Bring one of those for sure. If you can work with your pawn, it's going to make it even more powerful. And I also highly recommend the Deathly Arrow. Now, before I move on to equipment recommendations for the archer, I want to give you some important tips for damage and stamina management. First, let's talk about loose arrow versus steady arrow because this covers both damage and stamina. Loose arrow will auto target enemies and shoot them. So this is great for if you're fighting bats or spiders or you're fighting skeletons and you want to destroy the skull so that they don't come back to life. This is going to auto attack all of those things. I also tend to use it when I'm running through areas where I'm significantly higher level because I don't need to do that much damage to kill them and I don't have to aim. It's a win-win. The other good thing about this is that yes, it does less damage than Steady Shot, but you can see your surroundings better. And you are also ready to use any of your movement options at any time. Because, of course, there is a little bit of a downtime between using Steady Shot and then switching back into running and using all of your movement abilities. So this just keeps you open to immediately use those mobility options if you need them. Steady Shot, however, does do significantly more damage. This is going to be with your LB, L1, or R1, RB. I changed my... I changed my controller settings around to just flip them, but that's what Steady Shot is. And this is a great way just to shoot your bow in general because, as we said, it does more damage, but it's especially good after you've used a bunch of skills that consume stamina. So you're going to want to weave in loose shots when you might require the usage of a mobility skill, or you've missed your 13th Steady Shot on an enemy in a row. Oh, birds and people. I can't aim. Oh God, they're taking a man. I don't know if it's a good man. I can't aim. I can't aim. Help. And stay using Steady Shot to continue doing damage whilst getting your stamina back up to start using skills again. So the general rotation that I go through is I'll use a bunch of skills and then I'll do Steady Shot so that I'm keeping up that damage, but I'm getting my stamina back. And then I'll use another bunch of skills and I'll kind of just rotate like that. If you do this, stamina really isn't going to be a problem for you when you do get used to it outside of using the ultimate ability because it will always use all of your stamina. There's nothing you could do. That's what the move does. But you shouldn't generally have an issue with stamina. If you do find that you have an issue with stamina, I would say just try and keep your stamina maybe in that middle part of your bar and do the Steady Shots. When it gets to the middle, get it back top, get to the middle, get it back to the top, and just try doing that for a little bit until you get a bit more used to managing your stamina. Now let's talk about recommended augments for the archer from the archer vocation as well as other vocations. You definitely do not need to play these other vocations and get their augments if you don't want to. If you're like, I just enjoy the archer, I want to be the archer, I don't want to be anything else, you don't need to worry about this. This is just if you're really min-maxing. But mostly, I just want to tell you guys so you don't need to go scour the internet to find which ones would be good for the archer. So I'm going to just give you a list of options that I think are definitely very good and you should take them for sure, and then options that you can grab if you are playing archer. The archer augments that you definitely want to have no matter what are endurance, which increases your max stamina, and lethality that increases damage dealt when striking a target's vitals. As an archer, this is just what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to look for vitals as much as possible, and this is going to increase your damage by quite a bit. Other archer augments that are definitely good to have is you can have Ambuscade, which this increases damage dealt by your attacks when targets are not in a battle stance. It's just more damage, and more damage is good. Now, going outside of Archer, a really good one for you would be Verve from the Thief. This just gives you more strength. Again, this is a pure DPS class, so anything that increases your damage, your strength, your weak point stuff is gonna be good. So I do recommend that one as well. Another good one is Catalyst from the Sorcerer. This increases damage dealt when exploiting a hostile target's elemental weakness. Again, this can be really good for you if you're matching those elements with the arrows that you bring along with you. If you are wanting to potentially build into the knockdown power of your ability as an archer, you can grab dominance from the warrior. This augments your knockdown power. You do more knockdown power. Mystic Spearhand has a pretty good one with polarity. This augments your strength during the day and your magic at night. Of course, if you're playing at night and your magic is boosted, it's not the greatest thing, but ideally you're going to want to be in the daytime most of the time. And again, this is just more damage. And lastly, you have the Warfare skill Zeal, which reduces the stamina consumed when performing a weapon skill. So these are the ones that I would just personally take. You can also take the Thief skill Subtlety, which makes you less likely to be targeted by enemies. Generally, this would be good, but I really think that if you are getting good at the movement options of the archer and you have a pawn that's pulling aggro, you should be able to deal with an enemy if it has aggro on you for a little bit with your mobility options until that aggro is taken off of you. So you can absolutely pick that up from Thief if you're struggling with that. But when you get the movement down, trust me, you're not gonna need it. Now let's talk about rings. Any rings that increase your stamina or stamina regen are great. Personally, I would choose regen because archers can keep doing damage with steady shot whilst waiting for their stamina to come back. So I think that regen is going to be significantly better. Or if you have managed to find 15 of those Seeker's tokens, definitely go and pick up the Ring of Triumph. This is just a good ring, I think, for everybody. It adds a bunch of health and stamina to your character as well as carrying capacity. So this is just a good ring all around. If you really feel like you don't need any help with stamina, then definitely grab any ring that increases your strength. Again, more power is good. You are a DPS class. The only ring that I'm going to recommend that you absolutely take for sure, and then you can pick whichever one suits your playstyle, I'm going to recommend that you get the Ring of Proximity, which makes your bow attacks do more damage the closer range you are. Now, it's on a scale, so as you get closer and closer to the enemy, you're going to do more damage, but you can make use of this from really any range. It's just the closer you are, the more damage it's going to do. Now, this is the ring that I was talking about that is actually a really great clue as to how the game expects you to play as an archer in order to be the most successful you can. And I have confirmed that this ring does indeed increase the damage of your kick attacks as well as your bow attacks, because I noticed pretty quickly that as soon as I put this on, when I kicked an enemy, my kick did a lot more damage. So I'm either making it up when I was testing, and I might be losing my mind. That's very possible. But it really feels like it's making your kick do more damage. And even if it's not, and I am crazy, when you do your leaping punt, you jump back and you shoot them, and you're still within a decent proximity to take advantage of that. So this ring is great. Highly recommend it. Now, I'm going to tell you how to get this ring because it's the same as what I'm going to recommend when it comes to armor and weapons, at least for the beginning and midish part of the game. This is really a good set of armor, good weaponry, good ring that you can stick with for quite a long time. So if you don't want to know any of this, this is your time to click off. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. But if you want to know everything and you don't mind about spoilers, let's jump into it. So the ring, your bow, and your armor that are all really solid for the archer can all be found from the elf village via the quest with the elf boy that you may see in the main capital. He's just standing there right next to the armory dude. He can be accessed like basically at the beginning of the game. So you can do this very, very quickly. Now, this is the quest that is also going to end up leading you to learning the Archer ultimate ability. So really, this is a catch-all quest. You can do it right at the beginning of the game. As soon as you get to the capital, you can get a really good ring, a good bow, good armor, and the ultimate ability all from one quest. So if you do end up following this quest, it will take you to an elven village, and that's where you can purchase some sweet looking, in my opinion, armor, as well as it having pretty solid stats. The quest will also lead you to getting a sick looking and performing bow from Elf Boy's dad. And his dad just happens to be the Archermeister, so that is where you learn your ultimate ability. Make sure to keep talking to both of them until you have all of this, the ring and the bow and the ultimate ability. If you do not have all of those things, you are not done with their quests yet. So that is everything I know about the Archer so far. I started out this video thinking it's gonna be pretty easy and pretty short, but the more that I played with the Archer and the more that I really thought about it, I realized that the Archer actually requires you to do a good mix of things to make it perform really well. Using all of your kicks in combat, using your mobility options, having the perfect timing of that deathly shot, mixing your explosion arrow and deluging arrow with the mage pawns, or just bringing along a book and buffing your own weapon. All of these things work together to make the archer really strong, and I can totally see how people picking up the archer think that it's very weak because I feel like it just requires you to do more to get more out of it. With the magic archer, you can just go and sit at the back and do one push of a button and you delete a boss, pretty much. But if you're someone like me who likes to have a more involved vocation or class or whatever, but you still want to do good damage, but you want to do cool stuff while you're doing it and you want it to be a little bit more of a skill expression, I really think the archer is the perfect vocation for you people. Me people, you people. Because it requires you to have that skill expression to really make the most out of it, do optimal damage, and be the most powerful you can be. So if you do happen to have any other archer tips, please do leave them in the comments below. If we could try and keep out recommendations for a bow if it seems pretty spoilery, that will be good. I just really don't want to spoil this game for people. But yeah, there's all my knowledge. If you did enjoy it, please do leave a like on the video. I'm streaming Dragon's Dogma 2 every day, all freaking day over at Twitch. If you want to come and ask me any questions or have me show you anything at all, or just hang out with us, please do stop by. But that is it for this video. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned stuff, and I will speak to you guys later.